Hoi, welkom allemaal. Leuk bij weer een nieuwe aflevering van de Data Discovery Channel. We zijn vandaag bij Data Saturday, richting het einde van de dag. Nog steeds heel veel energie hier. En we'll switch to English. We've got two special guests here. Sarath and Gabi, would you first of all please introduce yourself? What's your role, what you do?
Sure, thanks so much for having us. I'm Gabi. I'm a member of the Fabric PG at Microsoft, the Fabric Customer Advisory Team in specifics. I'm located in Germany. I'm with Microsoft for 2.5 years now. And I'm working with customers in Germany, Austria and Switzerland. And together with my colleague, I'm also specifically focusing on the aspect of data governance.
Yeah, thank you, Gabi. My name is Sarath Sasidharan. I work as a senior PM on the Fabric Customer Advisory Team. I've been on the team for 2 years and with Microsoft for 8. Our talk was mostly about governance. And my focus is also for customers in Netherlands and Benelux, as well as a bit of Germany.
Oh,
yeah, thank you.
Awesome. So you speak to a lot of customers, like diverse customers, and you get to know all their challenges and solutions and help them, of course. And governance, very important topic, but most of the time not a big topic within organizations yet. How can we change it? I see some handshakes.
It doesn't get the priority.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's true, because what we see, like you mentioned, it's not a topic which comes into the mind when you design, at least for, but we're seeing that now that's not the trend. So the trend is usually that we have many customers who are looking at governance, and we would say are also looking at getting the clearance before they can move to production. And in that scenario, we think that this topic is gaining a lot of popularity. So people need to be educated on what exactly are the topics. And our topic in general was how do you do governance on Fabric and beyond. So that would mean like how do we also extend for data governance beyond Fabric into on-premise, on other clouds, for instance.
Yeah, and the other challenge is, as much as the two of us logically are very interested in Fabric and supporting our customers to actually adopt Fabric, we are well aware that Fabric will not be the only product in customers' data estates, and it makes sense. So governance also means to provide solutions that can cover your full data estate and integrate natively with Fabric as good as possible, as seamlessly as possible. But of course, Fabric itself also needs to provide some certain functionality itself for governance. And to your question, if we're speaking to all the customers, we would love to, but it's just not possible because we're just two people. But we are working together with our amazing account teams in the local subsidiaries. And also, we love to go to conferences like this and speak to partners like you, because that is another way of actually getting more information, getting more direct feedback that actually helps us understand the problems. If it might be that governance is just not getting the right priority, or if it's really not a difficulty, let me be honest, if somebody's telling me they don't have data quality issues, I can't believe it.
No, definitely not. Everyone has.
You gave a session yesterday and today, and you already told me it was a challenge today to fit everything in 3 hours into an hour.
Wow.
And can you now tell me in a couple of minutes what you did?
Thank you so much. I like challenges. So I will give it a try, and maybe Sarath, you will add all the content that I was missing. So
no pressure.
Maybe what we are trying to do is we are actually focusing on what are the recent challenges, because also the requirements for governance are changing throughout the time because of the volatility of the data, the flexibility, different major themes that we are seeing as part of how data is actually used inside companies. The growing importance of self-service analytics, for example. All of that has impacts on which functionality governance actually needs to provide. And so based on those findings, we are trying to focus on how to set up your Fabric platform appropriately in a way that makes it as easy as possible to govern the platform and the content in a certain way, we're focusing on the aspects of discoverability, because what we often see is that governance is seen as something to limit access, to restrict access, to actually lock the data in. And we see governance as a great opportunity for empowerment, to actually make it easy for users to find the right data, to get access to the data in an easy way, and to actually empower the users to work with this. Also helping the compliance and admin teams to have less work with it, because everything is monitored, audited, controlled. But of course that also covers the aspect of security and permissions, because without that you can't do that. And it covers the aspect of monitoring. So those are the 4 pillars that we are actually talking about. Plus, as I said, Fabric native data, but we also have, of course, the need of integrating with catalog tools like Purview. And Sarath, maybe you want to add a little bit about what Purview is adding to the picture?
Yeah, definitely, Gabi. So as Gabi did mention, most of our customers whom we talk to, they don't just have Fabric, right? We know that they have a lot of different data estates. And that's where Purview comes into play, because Purview can do on-premise, it can do AWS, it can do GCP, it can do SharePoint. So it's basically some place where your teams could control from a central point, and then the policies are applied to all these places. And that's something which you want.
The total data estate that Gabi already mentioned.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's the biggest point which we see, like what Purview can add to this, because it's Fabric is one source, but we are talking about multiple sources in different organizations. And this could be the key for managing such large, complex enterprises. And we are also seeing the trend of AI coming in. So how do you have, for example, like governed AI inside your organization? Because at some point of time, let's say the example of a bank, at one point of time, if you say that I'm going to give a loan based on an AI model, you need to explain, like, what did you actually take? Exactly. Yeah. And then if you don't have governance in place, how can you explain how did you give such stuff? Which can be quite sensitive in governments, and then also governed areas, for example, in Europe.
Yeah. You mentioned, but maybe you can answer for specifically the Netherlands. What are big changes currently going on in government and government requirements?
Yeah, so for us, what we see as a big trend is that many customers are asking for regulations, right? So and that's becoming more and more important, because let's take an example of things like BS 239, which is actually a regulation which is required for teams to report lineage, right? And that's gaining priority. So now governance is not becoming an afterthought, it's coming in the front. And people really have to check off stuff. Like previously it was just an Excel checkbox, but right now it's more than that. So people have to really show that we don't leak data, because if they do, then there are massive fines which they have to pay. And we are seeing a lot of that happening in Europe. So people are really getting onto the trend to follow what is governance. It's not the most best areas where people want to focus on, but it's gaining a lot of popularity now.
Yeah. So it's not that you want governance, but you have to.
Exactly.
You need to. And it doesn't limit you, but it gives you a lot of opportunities.
Exactly, and that is part of what we see all the time. So of course in Germany and Switzerland, for example, it's mainly the same challenges. We have general challenges like also GDPR, for example, which is a major topic for a few years now, but also industry-specific challenges. If we speak about FSI customers, for example, like you mentioned, there's a lot of challenges we're facing there. But again, by providing proper standardization, by actually being compliant to industry-specific certifications, we can ensure to the ITSec departments inside the customer area that we are actually aware of the challenges and that we are complying to those challenges. And on the other side, one of the challenges we're seeing when speaking with governance teams at customers is that, of course, the governance teams have to perform the risk assessment. They need to understand what can happen in the worst case if data actually gets leaked or data gets overshared or mistreated. Yeah. But I'm sorry. But we are actually also seeing that, especially when we're speaking about the breadth of users and data workers in inside the company, most of them are actually rather too afraid to do something wrong with the data, to overshare, to mistreat the data, than to actually willingly taking that risk. So it's something that we need to provide in both ways. On the one side, we need to raise the level of trust that users can have in the platform, to give them access only to the data they are allowed to work with, to freely use that, to be more encouraged to really work with the data. And on the other side, giving the governance and compliance team the opportunity to really proactively and reactively identify how data is used and treated. And in one of those hopefully rare cases where something happens, to have the appropriate audit information ready at hand to really react in an adequate way.
Yeah, and to mitigate what went wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. What is the key takeaway for people that attended your session? What should be their key takeaway?
I would say the key takeaway is we are taking governance very seriously as a very important aspect of the platform development. But like with many other things, with cross-workload, cross-platform functionality like this, it is something which cannot be fully implemented and provided before all the general functionality, including, for example, our security and permission management, are fully evolved. So it is a constant journey. It's a marathon rather than a sprint.
Yeah.
We are not at the place we want to be yet, but we are fully conscientious of that, and we are absolutely willing to keep up the invest, to actually close the gaps that we currently have, to listen to the feedback of our customers and our users, to understand which of those gaps are most important and if we are aware of all of them. And so even if it might appear that we're not good enough yet, that is not because we're not willing, but it's something we want to improve as much as possible and as quickly as possible.
It's a journey and we're not at the finish yet.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one major point which we want customers to take back from our session is also that basically it's not an afterthought, right? So they need to put it in basically the start of the project rather than, and that's a change which Microsoft also has. If you look at the product development, right? So security is non-negotiable. So basically we have sprints which focused on securing the platform, and that kind of heavy investments just shows how much Microsoft is invested as a tech company. And I think other tech companies are following the path too, because security is becoming paramount. It's not an afterthought. We need to make sure that we secure the data.
Yeah, from the beginning.
From the beginning, exactly. Security by design. And the second thing which we also mentioned about is basically that there's an explosion of data. So in your organization, you don't even know where sensitive data sits. And that's where you could rely on toolings, right? Like, for example, Purview, or maybe there are third-party services which actually look and help you with detecting data, sensitive data, because you don't know today where the data sits. As an organization, you have multiple devices, you have multiple way of communication which you guys do, Teams, Slack. So where does sensitive data go, right?
Yeah.
And finding that out is only possible through technology. And then leveraging tools like these, best practices on governance, that can help you to mitigate risks which can come with that.
Yeah. And it will only grow more and more and more. So it's something that you can start now. If you didn't start yesterday, start today, because it will grow. The usage will grow. More and more Power BI users will utilize the data. You need to know where it's being used, how it's used, and really empower, but also monitor.
Because it's terabytes of data, petabytes of data which you're kind of processing per day. So you really need to know, and it's both data in motion as well as data in rest. And the whole point is that now governance is not tied to just one stream. It's tied to everything. Every data, in wherever its form, it's generated and being processed, that's governance needs to play a role there. It needs to be tracked. It needs to be controlled.
Yeah, and especially with AI, machine learning on top of it, so you really need to get the right data at the right place, at the right tool. So that's something that's more and more important. So really good to see that investment. On the tool.
And I think it's a topic which is I would say people can find it overwhelming at the beginning, but it's best you can break it down into very, very small small modules, see like how is that affecting your organization, and then go for that. So you don't have to learn the whole of governance principles to actually go. We would say like it starts small and then build on top of it.
And maybe to add one important aspect here that we always try to actually bring to focus. Governance is not an IT problem. Governance is something where IT can support, provide appropriate tools, provide appropriate processes, but governance, especially when speaking about the sensitivity of the data, the value of the data, that is something which only the business departments with their specific business knowledge can actually provide. So if there is not the appropriate mindset of everybody working together to use data as an asset, to really treat data as something valuable and respectful and in the appropriate way, and work together, collaborate to actually make this successful, you will never be achieving the goals that you're aiming for. So it's not an IT responsibility. That is something which is super important.
Yeah, it's a shared responsibility, and IT can support. And most of the time it's forgotten, and good that you mentioned it, processes. Having the processes clear within your organization, how do we do our process and how can we monitor it? IT can also support that process, getting to know how the process within the systems work, but then you need to have the governance process on top of that.
Processes and responsibilities, bringing together all the stakeholders from the start, identifying all the stakeholders, who is responsible, who can provide, who needs to be included, who can actually support. All of this is important to, and like you said, the earlier the better. We know that from IT projects, but we also need it from setups like this. The earlier the better, because not only to not make it more complicated or require changes, but also to have everybody involved from the start, because that really helps people feeling responsible, feeling included.
Feeling responsible. It's my data, it's our data. We need to have it in control and the right quality, indeed. So it's a mindset and a culture.
100%.
Exactly. Another important point which I think is very important is that when you're talking about usage of this data, right? So basically we need to really make sure that it's of high quality. So and the whole point with governance, which we were talking about, is that it's basically that people can actually use any kind of data, they can actually process any kind of data, but it's the whole point which we wanted to convey is that they need to have a visibility of what data they use, what they are actually doing. And the main point of this is like when you're creating a data platform, the objective is not to lock down anything, because we want the users to use the data. We don't want to prevent the users to use the data. So governance is not putting like handcuffs on your usage of data. It's to enable you to use the data, but in a governed way. So you don't want to make it, because the whole point of setting a data platform is to the main KPI is to reduce the time to get to the data. So if you can take 3 days to get the data, if I can give it to you in a day, that's basically a win for your company, because you're talking about how many hours did you save, and how many new use cases can your business make out of it, how much revenue are you talking about. So basically it's about enabling users to create these platforms rather than hindering people to access your data. That's an important balance which we wanted to also share in our presentation.
Nice. It's really about empowering the users, but with power comes great responsibility, but you want to support the organization with that responsibility and don't have to carry it themselves alone. And the governance can help you with that great responsibility to really use that power.
And especially in the time of AI, where data is used, the responsible use of data and AI is very important. But on the other side, I think most companies understood that if they don't really use their data to gain insights, to actually predict what they should do next, to actually foresee and identify patterns that help them shape their business, that is something which will block them from becoming even better versions of themselves. And what is the purpose of creating huge and expensive data systems if you just use them to lock the data in and not use this expensive but valuable resource to get the most out of it, which means you have to open it up in a responsible but efficient way to actually be used by the people who can gain the insights, who can interpret those insights, who can actually follow up and take take decisions based on this kind of information. So why create those amazing but expensive systems when not making the best use out of it?
That's what we love, right? Making data actionable. We want to have action based on top of it instead of just storing it.
Because there are so many projects which I personally have been involved, which went on for multiple years with multiple millions of dollars, but they were scrapped because it was so tight. So there was a day when I still remember when we worked for the data project for 3 years. They exposed the data project to the business user, and the first question was, how can I use Excel in this? And they would say like, you can't, because we blocked everything. So they say like, okay, how are you guys saying like I'm going to create business value? So that understanding is key. So talking to business, keeping them involved in the governance cycle, and not just IT driving this exercise is key.
Yeah, use business cases and what you want to provide, and based on the business cases, fill it in.
And understand, no matter what you're doing, you will always have Excel.
Indeed. Nice one to close it up. Thank you, Gabi and Sarath, for sharing your insights about your sessions. And enjoy the rest of Data Saturday and maybe the next conferences as well. Hope to see you again.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bedankt voor de volgende keer. Tot de volgende keer.